Hello, it's Barbara Clunton here, the Associate Minister in this group of parishes. Just to reassure you, I'm not actually recording this in a field surrounded by sheep, but I've left this screen photo on because it's quite relevant to what we'll be talking about and thinking about in our service this Sunday. I'm going to use the reading from John's Gospel, a really familiar reading to most of you, from chapter 6. Jesus looked up and saw a large crowd coming towards him. So he said to Philip, where can we buy bread for these people to eat? He asked this only to put Philip to the test. He already knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 8 months' pay would not buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. Another of his disciples spoke up. It was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He said, "Here is a boy with 5 small loaves of barley bread. He also has 2 small fish. But how far will that go in such a very large crowd?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." There was plenty of grass, and they sat down. The number in men among them was about 5,000. Then Jesus took the loaves and gave thanks. He handed out the bread to those who were seated. He gave them as much as they wanted, and he did the same with the fish. When they'd all had enough, Jesus said to his disciples, "Gather the leftover pieces. Don't waste anything." So they gathered what was left, and from the 5 barley loaves. They filled 12 baskets with the pieces left behind from those who had eaten. That's a really good reading for what we're going to talk and think about this Sunday. And we're going to think about Lammas, which is one of the 4 major Christian rural festivals of the year. We've got Plough Sunday, which is the first Sunday after Epiphany when we bless ploughs. Rogation, the 5th Sunday after Easter, when we bless the boundaries. Lammas, the 1st of August or the end of July. And Harvest, which we're very familiar with, September or October. Lammas is also one of the ancient quarter days of the agricultural calendar, days where rent were and sometimes still are. Rent is due. Farmers would pay rent for their land 4 times a year, at Candlemas, early February, Whitsuntide, Lammas, and Martinmas, which is mid-November. So Lammas would be an important agricultural and Christian date for many centuries. And the word Lammas first appeared in the writings of King Alfred, and it's thought to be a derogation from the word loaf mass, and that's from the presentation of a barley loaf made from the first crop of barley in our churches, traditionally made from those first crops and brought to the altar to be blessed. It's also a time for us to recognise God's creation and the world. Lammas is the first reward from all that work of ploughing, tilling, tending and nurturing the crops and also the animals. And by having a Lammas celebration and a Lammas loaf, which we put on the altar, we're offering back to God the best and the first fruits of the season. We're all very familiar with our harvest services here in our rural areas. It's very easy to see while we celebrate harvest. The hard work's finished and hopefully the barns are full, and hopefully also with enough food stored for us and for the animals to last through the winter. But we've pretty much given up on celebrating Lammas these days. All that remains from it is Bank Holiday Monday. The religious origins are often totally forgotten. So why should we celebrate this beginning of harvest? And why should we consecrate the first fruits from the harvest to God? I think we should do this because it shows much more faith than celebrating when the harvest is finished and gathered in. At the end of the harvest, when we have our harvest festivals, normally we know what was safely gathered in, and we know how much we can spare to give to the church or give to charities. Lammas, however, is right at the beginning of the harvest. We don't know what our harvest will be. We have to give in faith. We offer to God the first and the best of what we have. If there are storms or floods or droughts, we might not have any other harvest. The fruits of the harvest might be the only fruits of the whole season. So when we give our first fruits to God, we give in faith. We trust and know that God will not let us down. So we need to give our best to God. And I do commend to you the last two sermons from Phil, where he talked about our giving in our parishes. God gives us his best. He gives the first and the best thing that he gave to us was his creation and our world. Farmers live with, work, and care for his creation daily and with dedication. And usually by Lammas, the 1st of August, farmers have made their silage and their hay and are busy compiling barley and oilseed rape. This, as we know, varies from year to year. Last year we had a tremendous heat wave and everything was in and sorted out. This year, the farmers are dodging between showers, trying to get the crops in safely. And another thing that was also celebrated traditionally at Lammas, in many places, the fences were removed from private land to turn the land into common pasture for everybody to share and to graze their animals on and to glean from the crops that were left, sharing the land with those less fortunate. Nothing was wasted, as we heard in our reading from John, when they gathered up all that remained from the barley loaves. Giving of our best does not always need to be a major thing. We just need to remember to put God first when deciding what to do. When I was pondering about this over the last few days, I remembered sitting in at a PCC meeting when I was rural officer in a small rural church. And they were having a long discussion, as you do in PCCs, about the provision of new pew cushions. The discussions covered whether the parish should be spending this sort of money on what they considered to be a luxury. One PCC member offered an old carpet from his dining room, which he was prepared to cut up and turn into pew runners. And I can still remember, although it was a long time ago, the horrified look on another PCC member as she burst out with the words, "That's not good enough for God. We should only give our best." And we can all think of many examples in the Bible of people giving their best to God. The young boy, as we heard in the reading, who gave his simple lunch of loaves and fishes, which is all he had that day. The widow's mite. Mary, who anointed Jesus with very expensive oil, which she was saving up for her funeral, as it were. And of course, the major example was the disciples, who gave up their whole lives to serve Jesus. But look at what God did with those gifts. Through Jesus, who blessed, the boy that shared that lunch, it fed 5,000 people. With the disciples, he empowered them to preach and to spread his love, that love that's still with us today, still being felt and used through worshipping here as we are today. And to go back to where we started, the Lammas loaf given and baked in the faith that God would provide the rest of the harvest, given when we didn't know what we had and what we had to come, given in faith and love. So remember that God always gives us in faith and love to every one of us, no matter how we hurt him, no matter how much we do wrong. God is still there, loving and encouraging each one of us. So maybe we should think a bit harder about what each one of us can give back to God in our faith and in our love. Give of our best, not to waste anything, and to look after creation. And I'm going to finish with a short prayer. Lord of all creation, each day is a gift from you. Give us eyes to see the beauty of your world, ears to hear the sound of your creation, and grace to use your gifts wisely and well. Amen.